Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Wandering Road Podcast. I'm your co-host, Dean, alongside my stalwart host, Chris, who created the show, who is effing awesome, and he was gracious enough to let me start the show today because this is kind of my baby of a topic. But we're going to talk today about the 1952 UFO sightings over Washington, D.C.
Enjoy
What's up,
thy
man?
crumbs.
Yeah, enjoy my your little crumbs of fiddles, you plebe.
But yeah, man, I'm excited to talk about this one because
Yeah.
you brought it up to me a couple weeks ago, I think it was.
Yeah,
It's been a while.
And here's the thing about this topic: no one's talking about it. Like all this shit, like flying around with UFOs and UAPs and all this stuff, drones and whatnot, or Dior bags if you're on TikTok. This is a topic that I remember from the old days of the History Channel. Yeah,
Dior bags? The hell are you talking about?
You haven't heard of this?
No.
Okay, this is kind of silly. I went down a rabbit hole on TikTok the other day, but as far as I understand it, what people are trying to do on TikTok is use the cover name Dior bags when they're referring to unidentified aerial phenomenon, or not just UAPs. They're like talking about the drone sightings, like all the drone sightings that have been going on across the globe for a while now. I guess there was a trend on TikTok where like people started referring to them as like handbags, like Dior bag, whatever kind of bags, as references to drones. So because their whole thing is like, oh, if you use the word drone, you're not gonna the algorithm's going to cut you out because you're a conspiratorialist or whatever. Their whole thing is like, oh, I have to use a cover name. So for whatever reason, someone started using Dior bags, like handbags. And if you don't know what Dior is, it's like a popular brand like Louis Vuitton or I don't even know, whatever other
like Chanel and all that crap.
Yeah. Exactly. So like they were using that as a cover name for talking about drones. And that's why I was just messing around and saying we're going to talk about Dior bags today.
Yeah. I want to talk about those Dior bags for a second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The drones. That's so irritating. On social media, you have to use like frickin' made up words.
I think their heart is in the right place in the concept that they're trying to, like, they believe there's a conspiracy that the algorithm is somehow being controlled in a way that will pull their content if they start talking en masse about something sensitive that like the powers that be don't want to be heard. I understand that that's actually a smart concept. I mean, that's like using code to hide and obfuscate what you're talking about. That's kind of smart. But
Right,
I also I'm not so sure that that's how it works. I don't think there's actually a cabal trying to control everything or that can even possibly control everything. What's your take on the drone situation, though?
I think the drone stuff, I'm like split down the middle, to be honest. I don't know what the hell it is. Apparently, close to where I live, there's been a few sightings, but it seems to have been like more localized around New Jersey, New York, the eastern seaboard, the northeast type of area. And they say that these drones are massive. They're like the size of vehicles.
Yeah.
Like a car. They don't emit any sounds. And apparently there's this claim out there that this guy on social media might have been a TikToker, took his drone and flew it up close to one of those drones. And there was no sound coming off of it, nothing like that. You don't hear any engines or anything like that.
So he got close to it.
Yeah, and then like something happened with his drone where it just died. It just immediately died and it just like dropped to the ground. And people are saying like, oh, it was confiscated by the authorities and all these different claims. Here's the thing. If you enjoy going down rabbit holes, which if you're listening to this podcast, you probably do. There is UFO or ufologist, whatever you want to call him, researcher, Dr. Stephen Greer. You remember him?
Yeah.
Guy with the glasses.
Right.
He said at a certain point in the future, there's going to be like a false flag type of alien attack or invasion, where it's going to seem like they're appearing out of nowhere in the sky.
Hmm.
And I immediately thought back to that.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this. I personally don't think it, like, I have some suspicions as to what's going on with the drones that I'll share shortly. I think that there is some kind of operation that is going on with the drones. And so one of the most intriguing theories about the drones that I've heard is that it's a mass show of force by the US military and the US government to the world that we have these drones. Like, we have access, we have the designs, we have the models, we have the technology. Here are the things we can do with them. And they send them up, and it's kind of like a surreptitious, kind of like quiet show of force to the rest of the world. When you have a military organization that is flexing its muscles trying to take over like a country or whatever, then the other country that is trying to prevent that from happening might do a show of force. So I think that what is most relevant in the situation with the drones is that people are seeing them en masse, right? We're seeing like all these things going on and no one knows where they're coming from. But I think it's fascinating that if you had UFOs appearing in the sky and you had a government that didn't want people to talk about it, what better way to obfuscate or hide the fact that these extraterrestrials were making themselves known than to throw up a bunch of drones in the sky? You know what I mean? Like, like if you have a ton of drones, you could be like, oh, that was a drone. Oh, that was a drone. Oh, that was a drone. And if someone sees an actual UAP or actual extraterrestrial vehicle, they might be like, oh, that was a drone. I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm just saying that would be a damn good way to do that if you were trying to do something like that, if that makes sense.
It has been rumored that whatever technology that we have, the military is at least a decade ahead.
Oh, further than that, no doubt.
2-3 decades ahead.
Yeah.
Within the realm of possibility, don't they have like freaking like sound weapons or some
Yeah,
sort of
directed
like
sound weapons.
Yeah.
You brought up a very interesting thing that I remember. It was in the news. It was popular for a while. I think as far back as 2017. If you go online, I mean, this is on government websites and stuff. It's a documented case called Havana syndrome. So Americans living in Havana, specifically government employees, they suddenly experienced severe headaches, dizziness, blurred vision, tinnitus, vertigo out of nowhere. And the strange thing was they were all reporting this experience over time, but like simultaneously, it was the same experiences for them. So cognitive difficulties, hearing problems were like the top ones. Dizziness was a secondary one, headaches also. Who knows what would cause such an effect? I mean, there's theories out there. Imagine there's some kind of technology that could be localized or focused on somebody and it has an effect like that. I mean, that's honestly terrifying. That's just something that's a minor note to what you just mentioned.
I guess we could say our overall point that it could potentially be a flex of technological muscle.
Yeah,
Saying
like sonic weaponry, microwaves, like who knows?
and could just appear where we want them to appear. Or it could be aliens.
Okay,
Why
hold
not
on.
make it fun
Let's,
and make it being aliens?
yeah, oh, it's fucking aliens. Well, no, you know what's even, I don't know, man. Like, I honestly don't know what would be more interesting is our governments that have access to technology that is decades ahead of what is released in the public or extraterrestrials. It's like, well, how did you get the technology in the first place? I mean, you must have some kind of secret organization, underground bunker that has just been going at this for decades. I mean, there's no way. There's no way that there is not some kind of massively secret, crazy program going on.
I don't know where you stand with like the Bob Lazar stuff, but like he came out like 30, 40 years ago saying he actually worked in one of these secret bases.
Yeah, people were trying to hide shit, right? Like from what he did, right? Though, like you were just saying that people were trying to obfuscate or hide what he had done, but he's still out in the public media. So like that's hard to imagine what the truth is, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. If there was nothing to it, like why would they be harassing him, and
That's
stuff
true.
like
Yeah, I
that?
could see
Your
that.
prototypical, like, oh, you get erased from like a public record or some other bullshit like that.
Yeah.
But I'll digress and I'll let you jump into today's topic.
Yeah, and before I do, there's one more little node of information that I want to talk about that I think the listeners might find fascinating, because this is not common knowledge, but it's open knowledge. So you can go out there and research it yourself. And I bet you, Chris, are not tracking this. So it'll be interesting to get some discussion going on this before we head into the actual topic. But I had an epic, what I think personally is an epic realization recently about all these disclosures going on. You know, you have extraterrestrial sightings, you have these panels in multiple governments across the globe talking about how are we going to research this stuff? How do we take this stuff seriously? And all of these leaks going on about what people have experienced in terms of like craft and actual physical beings, or what did they call it? They called it organic matter, or what's that word
Biologics.
again? Biologics. Yeah. So biologics and stuff like that. So all this stuff is coming out. And as we've said in previous podcasts, like this is this is new to modern society, like to actual society, because even going back to the 90s, like you would hear some inklings of like, oh, there's a panel, or like Project Blue Book even earlier, you know, the government's studying UFOs, but it was still very like mysterious with a veil covered over it. And now though, we're going through a time period where it's becoming more endemic. People are sharing it more often, and we're actually seeing physical, legitimate government panels discussing it. Here is my epic realization that I had recently about this. If you Google this, you can Google this. It's an open source, open knowledge. It's called Executive Order 13526. 13526. So this is for the US government. After 25 years, classified documents go into a process of declassification review, and it's an automatic process. So if you have a document in the US government that is classified, no matter what it is, after 25 years, it enters automatic review. And there's a whole government section that deals with declassification, right? At 50 years, there are two exceptions for this classification review. At 25 years, there's 9. There's a lot of exceptions to why you could still keep something classified after 25 years. I think a lot of it has to do with like the revelation of information, sources, and methods. You know, like if the classified information reveals how the government got that information, and they need to keep that close hold so the adversaries don't know how we're doing it, that makes sense. But after 50 years, there's only 2 exceptions. Here's the crazy thing. After 75 years, the classified information can only be retained through a specific requirement that requires multiple levels of permission. So basically what that says is after 75 years, most of the classified information is going to be released. So it is possible that, maybe some future government is going to correct that or change that and say like, oh, well, we're just going to keep everything close hold. There's nothing stopping that happening. But right now, the way the law is set up and the way the structures in the government are set up, there's a certain amount of time before classified information lapses. This is what I find fascinating. Today, we're talking about an incident that happened in 1952. 2025 minus 75 years is 1950. We're only a couple years away from that 50-year mark, where there are only 2 special exceptions where classified information can be retained for so long. So my epic realization that's so fucking long-winded, putting on the tinfoil hat, epic realization, maybe the reason why all this disclosure is happening is because the government realized, oh shit, we have all these classified documents over the last 50 plus years that are going to start getting automatically placed in these review processes, and shit is going to come out eventually. So realizing that, they're trying to get ahead of the game. This is right to my call. I've said in previous episodes, in the next 5 to 10 years, I have like a 75% certainty that we're going to have disclosure.
Given that we're coming so close to the 75-year mark specifically for this incident, and the countless other incidents that have happened prior, I think you're right. It's not surprising that we may have disclosure within the next decade that, hey, aliens are real. There are multiple civilizations. And I hope that happens, because I think that would be really fascinating. You're like, oh shit, there's actually other life out there.
Yeah.
But again, what does that do to our fragile society? But I feel like that's a discussion we could go into at a later time.
We had to talk about everything initially before we talked about the actual physical event. So essentially what happened In July of 1952, over Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States, there was essentially a smattering of UFO sightings. It's painfully obvious, but the reason why that's significant is because Washington, D.C. is, it's been densely populated for many, many years. And it's basically a hotbed of activity. People are out and about. It's essentially like New York City, but it's, obviously the capital. So like a lot of those included initially the air traffic controllers at Washington National Airport, which is now Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, and also at Andrews Air Force Base. So you have multiple unexplained radar blips that were happening from July 19th to the 20th of 1952. You can imagine this is just the start of the Cold War, but still it's a consideration where, Soviet Union, they have capabilities that we are afraid of. We need to worry about national defense. So what happens? The U.S. scrambles F-94 starfighter jets to intercept. So this is a real event, right? Like, so we actually have the fighter jets of the time, which, by the way, the Lockheed Martin F-94 Starfires, just for statistics, they could travel 640 miles per hour at top speed. They were turbojet, two-seater, but they were basically fighter jets of the day. So, 640 miles per hour at top speed, they're probably not pulling those G's at the maximum, but they're getting close to maybe like 550. That's really fucking fast. So they scramble these jets to track these fast-moving orbs. Eyewitnesses are reporting that radar is reporting. The radar is picking up these objects as traveling up to 7,000 miles per hour. So that's the first wave. Things died down a little bit. People, like, okay, maybe that was a one-off. However, there's a second wave a week later, July 26th to the 27th. Again, another 48-hour span. You have another set of visual confirmations from pilots and civilians on the ground who are witnessing not just these orbs in the sky, but the jets that are chasing them. So again, the jet fighters are sent to intercept the F-94 Starfires, or they're trying to track these entities or these orbs at high speed. The orbs are doing high-speed maneuvers to evade them. The radar is confirming this. Nobody knows what's going on. It's fucking chaos for a week. People are like, what is going on? And not just that, you have thousands of people seeing these orbs in the sky, and then things just go quiet. The next day, after that second incident, you have mass media talking about how, aliens are here, they're invading, UFOs, etc. It kind of creates like a little bit of a hysteria, right? But then you have a press conference to kind of try to quell it. On July 29th in 1952, Major General John A. Samford of the U.S. Air Force, who was also the director of intelligence for the CIA at the time, he held a large Pentagon press conference. And he basically he tried to play it off. He's like, oh, these are just layers of warm air. They're just, these are just natural phenomena that are created by different changes in the atmosphere and temperatures and stuff. And he claimed the visual sightings was part of some kind of misdesignated or misunderstood celestial object, like a star or meteorites. The listener, you can actually go to YouTube or whatever and type in the actual discussion that Major General John A. Samford had a live statement that was recorded on these flying saucers. And he was just trying to play it off. You have someone come on afterwards. His name is Major Kehoe. And he's basically saying, well, this is bullshit. This is just misdirection. Like, flying saucers are real and they're here. And what amazes me is this press conference took place not long after Major General Samford had his press conference to try to discount them. So there's some kind of like strange obfuscation or hiding going on here. I don't know. After going into that long spiel, what's your take on all this?
So I know the video that you're talking about because I actually watched it.
Mhm.
And you're correct with Major General Samford. So Major Kehoe, like you said, was saying like, no, saucers are real. Their UFOs are real. So we have two conflicting statements there. One thing I don't think you mentioned with the sightings and the scrambling of the F-94s is that when they got to the location of where these objects were, the objects would just disappear.
Yeah.
Do some sort of evasive maneuver. They would just disappear.
And show up like miles away, right? Or like a mile away, right? Like they would just like pop back into...
What they would do is they would disappear. The jets would stick around for a while until they were running low on fuel. And as soon as they left, they would immediately come back.
Interesting.
Like instantaneously, they would just appear. So it makes you think, like, what the hell is going on there?
Yeah.
That you have these objects that are being tracked on radar that are going 7,000 miles an hour. Then you have the scrambling of the jets, which we like to do as a civilization. I mean,
Scramble the jets.
Yeah. We come in peace, scramble the fucking jets, kick their ass. No, but seriously, I mean, what else could it be? You have one person claiming that no, it's trick of light, it's the weather. You get your typical coached answer.
Yeah.
With Roswell, what was it? It was just a weather balloon. No, it's just parts from a weather balloon. With this incident, 2 separate occasions, twice they scrambled in jets. If there was nothing serious about it, and if it was weather anomalies, if it was caused by the weather or the atmosphere or some sort of illusion or like that, why are you scrambling your fighter jets and having them circle around until they are on low fuel? They leave, and then these things come back. And then you have another major coming on right after you saying, like, no, this is real. UFOs are real. Flying saucers are real. Somebody's lying.
Yeah. I mean, if you look back in the historical context, like if you do a deep research, you see that there are deep criticisms from the scientific community about the quote unquote explanation about the weather events and anomalies and stuff like that. But the experts are essentially saying back then that the temperature inversion explanation and the atmospheric phenomena explanation are completely inconsistent with the physical ground visuals that individuals were reporting at the time. We're talking about civilians. And the way that the government or the US Air Force tried to explain away these visuals in conjunction, the quote unquote atmospheric phenomena, is that, they're misconstruing how they're viewing celestial bodies. So falling stars or shooting stars or basically their way of saying like comets or meteorites or whatever coming from the sky that are a natural phenomenon. But also they're saying, you're misrepresenting the stars in the sky. To call that out at that time, at the same time, in conjunction with the fact they're initiating this debunking campaign, it just screams to me obviousness. Like you're either trying to do one of two things. You're either trying to hide a truth that you don't want people to know, or you're trying to keep people from going into mass hysteria. I mean, if the latter is possible, where it's like, okay, I get it. The government is trying to keep people from like going into a craze about UFO phenomena. But if you buy into that narrative, you have to accept the idea that they believe that somehow society is going to be destabilized by this one event. That's fucking bullshit. Nobody in their right mind is going to like worry about the destabilization of society to that degree from this one event. So what does that leave? That leaves the original example of they're trying to hide something. This whole event just screams to me like they're just fucking hiding shit.
And I mean, to be honest, the thing with those objects, with those UFOs, they're displaying intelligence. If it was something with nature or weather or with a star, what is it, shooting stars or meteors or something like that, right?
Right.
There's no fucking way. There's no physical way they can just disappear at will when the jets appear and then come back in the same position. That's what's getting to me with this, because they're appearing on radar. And I guess I'm not familiar with radar. I've never used it. I guess a lot of things could show up on there, like animals or stuff like that. Or so I don't know of any bird that could fly at 7,000 miles an hour.
I mean, to play devil's advocate, I know that there are weather phenomena for a fact that can impact radar.
Right.
But my whole thing with this entire situation is that you have, like I said earlier, it's not only you're talking about visual confirmation from multiple people over the capital of the fucking United States. You're talking about incidents that scrambled jets. That said to me that, there was something that was a concern at that moment that showed up on the radar. Let's take a step back. If there are physical phenomena that are happening over the course of weeks a few weeks. Don't you think that our weather experts, quote unquote experts, would know or anticipate such a thing? They would see such a thing happening over time. I guess it's possible that, like maybe in every sense of, or every case where there's some kind of like natural phenomenon in the sky, that they would scramble the jets or whatever, and then like that just wasn't reported on. That's possible. But the fact that the jets were sent up multiple times, don't you think that after a certain period of time, they would be like, oh, well, this blip on the radar is consistent with what we've seen in the past with natural phenomenon? So it's either one or two things. They either take it seriously and they have to scramble jets every time, even though they know that, oh, this is probably a natural phenomenon, but they have to take it seriously. Or what I think is happening is, or this phenomenon in the sky that they attribute to natural forces wasn't so frequent, and they scrambled the jets because they didn't know what was going on. And they're like, oh, fuck, we need to get up there because it could be the Soviets.
I
It
was
could
about to
be,
say that.
dropping bombs. So like,
Yeah.
it's so obvious. Like if you just use natural analysis and introspection, like, it just seems so obvious to me that some weird shit was going on in July of 1952.
I'm glad you bring up the Soviet part, because what better, I don't want to say excuse
Yeah,
you have,
reason or
or some
whatever.
reasoning that you could fall back on multiple times over. We didn't know what it was. We
Right.
thought it was something else. We thought it was something dangerous. Might have been the Soviets. We had to scramble the jets. But then we got there and it turns out it's a weather anomaly. So don't worry
Right.
about it. Everybody just go about your day. Nothing is going to go wrong. You're fine. Everything is fine. Like that one that one guy, I forget his name, but he passed away, but he appeared in like a bunch of comedy movies. He's like
Yeah, yeah.
notorious with white hair, and he's like, everybody calm down, everything is okay.
I think back to the movie Airplane, where it's like, oh, I picked the wrong day to stop doing methamphetamines. Here's my favorite quote, real quick. I'm going to read something to you real quick. This is my favorite quote from this entire experience. So, in the American newspapers that covered similar statements from all of the people who were talking about that, like everybody was basically giving their 2 cents, because this is widely publicized, right? Like this, after it came out in the newspapers, it became international news. And so, one of my favorite quotes from this entire situation was from a man named Ernest Esklinagon. He supposedly debunked all of these flying saucer allegations by saying they could not be supersonic craft because there was no sonic boom reported. And the reason why I find that so hilarious and fascinating is because back in the day, even the most prolific, well educated person who might have understood how fast traveling objects in our space, time, and atmosphere worked, where like if you have something traveling at X amount of speed, it's going to create a sonic boom. But that was them then. Like that's their perspective back then. Like like nowadays, there's all kinds of science to suggest that if you can disrupt the atmosphere around you while you're traveling at a high rate of speed, you might be able to circumvent pressure that occurs from fast travel in an atmosphere. Basically, what I'm saying is like, we have explanations today as to how extraterrestrial vehicles might work, but back then, the way to debunk this was like, oh, well, they traveled super fucking fast and there was no sonic boom over DC that night. So therefore, there must not have been any like physical objects over DC. But nowadays we know that that's, from physics and stuff like that there are explanations to make that not true. That just says to me that they were feeding people or relying on people to debunk this without actually addressing the possibilities of physical movement that were happening over DC that night. That's what I think.
One thing I wanted to jump to really quickly is
Mhm.
that I found archive newspaper article from Seattle. I apologize. It's from the Atlanta Journal from May 12, 1952. So the article starts Seattle, Washington, May 12th. Responsible observers believed Monday that a blinding blast which rocked the city of 500,000 persons may have been an exploding meteor, but talks of flying saucers and guided missiles could be heard on any street corner. Meanwhile, the military was deep in a thorough but closed-mouth investigation and intelligence officer at McCord Air Force Base near Tacoma said an official statement may be released later on Monday. So they asked a couple of people their opinions, but I want to jump to where it says all observers.
Mhm.
All observers agreed that the mysterious object was traveling from southwest to northeast when it blew up. Despite the force of the blast, there were no reports of damage, no fragments of the thing have been recovered. Switchboards at communication centers and police stations were jammed by calls from curious and alarmed persons. Some believe the blast was caused by a guided missile directed at the Strategic Defense Center. A few were certain a flying saucer had blown up. Air Defense Command officers refused to venture an opinion, but said they had undertaken a complete and thorough investigation. And there you have it.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
So, what happened prior to this?
Fucking
1947.
Roswell.
Roswell. Exactly. What's
Around the same
already-
time, July. Yep.
Yeah, what's already in the minds of people of
Mhm.
pop culture at the time? Flying saucers,
UFOs,
UFOs,
yep.
flying saucers. And this article, shortly before that incident happens at the Washington airport and in Washington, D.C., you have thousands of people in Seattle seeing this and hearing this thing, thinking, what do they go to immediately?
Yeah.
Flying saucer.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up because if you go to the Wikipedia page for the 1952 event, you can see a screenshot of it's basically a graph of all the sightings that happened between June and September of 1952. And obviously there's a spike around the time that the UFOs were being seen in DC, but you can see peaks and troughs before that and after that of all the supposed UFOs. And somebody marked like, oh, Look magazine published an article about UFOs, and Life magazine had an article, like, etc. So we can't discount the idea that, like you said, in 1947, Roswell happened. There was already like buzz and talk about extraterrestrials from different origins coming to the planet Earth, and they were, crash or whatever. Like, the government knew stuff that we didn't know, etc. When we look back at history, I think there's a natural inclination to assume that everybody who talks about anything in history has some kind of altruistic, untouchable perception about what was happening at the time. But we're all humans, man. Like, we, as a group of people, of course there were degenerates. Of course there were people who were violent. Of course there were people who were habitual liars. If you asked me, talk about 1952 in general, I think my brain would automatically go to like, oh, anything anyone says is reputable. At the same time, human nature plays into it. And it's like, well, even in 1952, there were people who were trying to get attention. Even though internet wasn't existing back then, like, people weren't trying to go viral. I still think that people were trying to be relevant and meaningful. I think that most of the sightings, I would argue, could probably be attributed to people trying to go along with the trend. However, I will not say that if you have an uptick in visuals or sightings of UFOs, that does not mean that there isn't an actual physical uptick in the phenomena that's going on. So if you have phenomena going on in the sky, you might have an uptick in terms of like people who are false reporting because they want to be part of the clique. You also have people who are seeing something that attributes to that higher peak. And I don't know if that makes sense. I think that there's something going on here, but I don't know if every single case is explainable or not. But I think that there are definitely some cases that are not explainable, if that makes sense.
You've said it before. I've said it before that people will just make shit up to be included.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
you
there's always a
can't
subsect.
discount that. Yeah,
Always.
there's always a
Yeah.
subsect. And it's that small percentage of people that will ruin the credibility of everything else.
Yeah.
Because for some particular fucking reason, those are the ones that are outed first. It's like,
I
okay,
know,
it's
right?
like, okay, it's bullshit. Then it's like, okay, great. Now we have to take all these other cases and, I don't want to say toss them aside, but it's like, did you really see this? Did you really
Right.
see a flying saucer? You sure it just wasn't a star or a
A
cloud
star.
or
Jeez.
or an airplane, the lights of an airplane. I mean, we come back to the same question that we always attempt to answer in the beginning. What really happened? We know what happened with the sequence of events. We know what we're told. We know that the jets were scrambled. We know what people saw. But at the end of the day, all we can do is speculate as to what these objects really were.
Yeah.
Were they extraterrestrial? Was it some sort of military training exercise to see how we would respond
No
if there was a
fucking way.
potential attack on the Capitol?
No way. I don't
You don't
I
think?
would not believe for a second that it was some kind of like test of society. And here's my reasoning.
Not test of
Be-
society, but for the military itself, like a live exercises. Like,
oh,
okay, we're gonna.
like responsiveness or
Yeah,
no, I think honestly, I think if you wanted to do something like that, you would not make it so obviously centered around UFOs. I think if you did a situation like that where you wanted to train your personnel in a live fire example, you would probably explain that, oh, the Soviet Union has some kind of advanced technology that we're not tracking. You have to also figure into the idea that they would be inciting fear to the population, which I don't doubt for a second. There was fear permeating people who were living through this time period in July of 1952, where like there were unidentified flying objects in the sky over our capital at the height of the Cold War, where nuclear bombs exist and B-52s are flying regular runs and etc. I don't think you would need to implement or impart or inject the idea that some being, some third party from another planet might be a threat to the world. You would just have to say, the Soviets have some advanced technology and we're responding to it. I think that that's probably the way that they would go initially because it's too convoluted to me that they would use UFOs. So
no,
that
no.
says
What
to
I was
me,
saying was what I was trying to get to, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Was that they were using this as a live training exercise for a situation in which the Soviets might like their aircraft might just like, okay, shit, they're here. We got to scramble. Like
okay, so
we got to
yeah,
go.
so
That's what I
using
was trying to get at. Yeah.
so blaming it on UFOs initially and saying that this is our response. But honestly, like I think that the amount of sorties that they were flying, because there was an event that was happening during this visual, which is the requisite normal flyover of DC of B-52s. And the B-52 bomber at the time was the most powerful delivery system of weapons, ammunition, and nuclear weapons at the time. So like basically B-52s were always in the sky during the Cold War, essentially. So I see what you're getting at. I understand, like they're using UFOs as a way to test responsiveness to the lesser degrees of the military that would be responsible for that. I can see that. The only caveat I would say would be if they started injecting UFOs as a new fear, they would probably be aware that if they did that, they would potentially cause mass hysteria in society because not only are you worried about Soviets dropping nuclear weapons, you're also worried about UFOs taking over the capital. So that, I mean, like, I understand what you're saying, but I think that that lays credibility to the idea that this was an actual phenomena that is not explainable. They were trying to address, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. And another thing that my mind goes to is what if after 1947 with Roswell, they kind of realize
Yes.
we have to be prepared for
Yep.
something like this.
Could be for sure.
And again, could it have been a live training exercise of how they would quickly respond to UFOs because they don't have to inform the people on radar that they're doing this?
Yeah.
You treat it as like a live event. And for anyone that's like worked in IT and stuff like that, when you do your disaster recovery stuff, there are certain groups of people that are not on the end
Right.
of something going down. Like, okay, we just took down the mainframe. And people that rely on that, They don't know that you're pulling the plug on that and that it's a test. To them, it's down. It's like, holy shit,
Yeah.
I can't do my mainframe work. What are we going to do? We're going to go and, inform the people in charge that can handle this type of situation. But given who I am a host of a fucking paranormal podcast that talks about cryptids, ghosts, demons, aliens. I think we're going to go on the side that those were UFOs, those were extraterrestrials. The military, the Air Force, they were just reacting because they didn't know what it was.
Completely agreed. And to add on to that, there was one piece of information that I think is imperative to this story, which is the leader of the Air Force's now known Project Blue Book, Captain Edward Ruppelt. So basically, if you're not familiar, Project Blue Book was a way for the U.S. Air Force to create a subsect of analysts and leaders and whatever to get after the concept of UFO sightings, like what's going on. Like they basically took every single case of documented UFO sightings and they went into deep detail about how they would uncover it, they would document it, they would find all the information that they needed to. Captain Ruppelt, he was not consulted prior to the press conference of the UFO incidents in 1950 over DC. He essentially went on to denounce the explanation that it was temperature inversions, that some radar anomaly or whatever. He was basically saying, like, this is bullshit. Like, we've been spending years researching all of these events over the United States about UFO sightings and stuff. And his final inclination was that there is a national security threat to the presence of UFOs. To me, that speaks volumes. Like if you have somebody who is not only part of a government sanctioned UFO research organization, but also a military member who is saying this in his final report, this is, we need to do more research into this. Like that's really significant. And that was in 1952. So, and Project Blue Book went on into 1969 until it was revealed as declassified. There's no doubt in my mind that something happened here that was unexplainable.
No, I completely agree with you. It's something unexplainable. Like I said, I think it's extraterrestrial.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I will always say that is just because on the scientific side, like the universe is so vast, there's so many galaxies, our galaxy is massive. And it would be really trying to think of a better word other than ignorant to think that we are the sole intelligent life in our vast universe and in our galaxy.
Yeah.
Considering
And,
how many billions of years old the universe is and our
Yeah.
galaxy itself. And think about this. When the James Webb Telescope looks at a particular galaxy or a particular star or something of that sort, just think about the fact that that star or galaxy is 10 light years away, 30 light years away, 30 million light years away. You're seeing it as it was 10 years
that
ago.
time period.
That time period.
Right. I have to throw one more terrifying idea out there that I've been thinking about the last couple weeks, and this is a trigger warning. This is a really heavy concept. I really feel
You said
like
the
given
magic word.
did I say heavy?
Yeah, you said heavy.
Oh, fuck you. Fuck it. It's whatever.
You said
It's
heavy
fucking
concept.
heavy. It's fucking heavy. Whatever. I will come up with another synonym at some point. But listen, here is the gravitas of the concept. Given the age of the universe that we think that we know, like 13 plus billion years old, and the age of the Earth, which is 4.3 billion years old, humans have only been on Earth, conscious, aware, as we consider them modern humans, for 200,000, 300,000 years or whatever. It's a blip on a blip on a blip on a blip on a blip, whatever. Like it's such a minuscule amount of time. And the thing that gets me is that if there were a situation where there was another race of beings who were ultra intelligent in our general vicinity, doesn't matter if they were even in our sphere of influence whatsoever, then anything that we are and do is automatically subjugated to what they are and like what their purpose is. So what I mean by that is we like to think of ourselves as like organic. We come about naturally. We're here. We provide meaning to our earth and whatever. Like we have all this beautiful science and art, etc. But in reality, if the earth and the universe is as old as it is, I think that naturally increases the likelihood that we are some kind of, study organism or subordinate group of an ultra galactic higher intelligence. Like, even if you want to argue the fact that we're some kind of like uh algorithm, or some part of like some kind of study in a virtual reality, I think that like the fact that we are intelligent but we're alone and the universe is so old lends credibility to the idea that we're just like we're fucked. Like we are subjugated upon like whatever reason the subjugation is, but we are not the primary drivers and sources of our reality. Just so evident from our inability to control ourselves and control our reality, and like, traveling to different places and stuff. So like it's terrifying, but I think that like, it's possible that we are test subjects, so to speak.
That would suck if we're test subjects.
Yeah, it would suck, but I think that based off of the information we have, like it's probably true. If there are other higher beings of intelligence, like as soon as aliens come out as, oh, they're more advanced than us, they have more information than us, they're stronger than us, then fucking boom, we are the ants of we are the ants to humans that humans are to aliens.
Aliens.
No doubt.
Yeah. Or maybe chimps.
And chimps. Yeah.
Yeah.
But still chimps. Like we throw them in fucking zoos and like whatever. Like,
by the way, dude, check out this picture I sent you. It's of a flying saucer. I found it in the National Archives catalog. It's a really clear picture from 1964.
interesting.
Isn't that awesome?
Man, what's funny is like I look at that and I'm like, oh, that's like an old school harmonica version of UFO. like
You think someone's
if they
holding
had-
a harmonica with a string off camera?
if they had technology back then that is intergalactic, I feel like a ship would not look like it was a harmonica.
No, it's curved.
That's true.
I'll put
like,
it in the episode description.
do it
So everyone
sure.
can see.
Yeah.
What is your final word to wrap up today?
So my final word is that the 1952 incident over DC was a very real incident that was inexplicable, where people saw not only visual but radar based signatures that had some kind of merit to them. I don't think it was purely aerial or weather phenomenon. I think that there was something more going on. The reason why I think that most of all is that the government came out and tried to debunk it to the degree that they did. So yeah, the fact they scrambled jets, they scrambled all kinds of resources to try to address this, that says to me that there was something more going on. What's your take on this?
No, I'm in the same camp. I think there was something real going on. They had no idea of what it was. I think it was a genuine reaction to something unknown, and they genuinely believed it was a potential threat to,
For sure. Yep.
I mean, not only national security, but world security, you could say. So I think there was something extraterrestrial involved. Because if
No
it
doubt.
wasn't, they wouldn't have tried so hard to debunk it and, downplay it the way that they did with that press conference.
Yep. Totally agree.
All right, folks, let us know what you think about this topic that we discussed today. Do you guys think there was something actually going on that the government and military was trying to suppress back in 1952? Or do you think it was a hoax? It was some sort of weather anomaly that happened on multiple occasions in which the lights just completely disappeared when the jets appeared and then came back. So please let us know your thoughts and opinions. And we hope you enjoyed today's episode. And thank you so much for everyone that tunes in. We really appreciate it. For this new year, we have, I'd say, big goals in mind for the podcast, Dean. Just keep trying to grow as a product, make things better.
You're going to see our ugly mugs, our faces at some point on YouTube. We're just going to try to grow organically for you guys. Just let us know what we can do.
What I will say is that we are committed to growing the platform. We are committed to making this consistent, making it a better product for people that listen. So we're always trying to find ways to better the episodes and the quality that we provide to you, the listener. And we
And
really
not
appreciate everyone that listens.
and yeah, absolutely. And not just that, like I think the one thing we want to sell the most is we're genuine. Like we're real people. We're having real conversations. We have in some cases a deeper knowledge about stuff than what is available easily out there. So like we're trying to coalesce our knowledge and information into this platform.
Yeah, like Dean said, you know, we just love having these conversations, and we know a lot of people enjoy listening to these conversations. Like I said many a times before, if there's a topic you want us to cover, or if you want to come on the show to talk about a topic, shoot us an email. We'll be more than happy to have you on. Within the past year, we've had people on that have reached out to us directly. So we are
Yep.
more than happy to engage with the community.
Thanks everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning into today's episode of The Wandering Road. You can find us on Apple, Google, Spotify, and most podcast platforms. Be sure to subscribe and share. Also, don't forget to give a follow on Instagram at twroadpodcast and follow my TikTok at twrpodcast. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.